Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of a guy who didn't finish it, didn't yell what you think he did, and who wasn't even riding his own horse. Yep. Paul Revere is basically the Bruce Springsteen of the American Revolution. Iconic, inspiring, and the face of a movement. But absolutely not a solo act. Because here's the truth. Paul Revere wasn't alone that night. He didn't shout the British are coming. And while his ride was important, the real story involves multiple riders, British patrols, and one dude who literally jumped his horse over a stone wall in the dark. And yet, only one guy got a poem. Oh, and P.S. Max Weinberg is a beast on drums. Today on History on the Margins, we're cracking open the myth of the Midnight Ride to uncover what really happened on April 18th, 1775, and how a solid PR campaign turned a three-man relay race into an epic solo legend. Because in American history, sometimes the guy who got caught still gets a statue. Let's start with the version you probably heard in school. The one burned into your brain somewhere between no taxation without representation and that one kid in class who thought muskets were cool. It goes something like this. Paul Revere, brave and determined, rides through the Massachusetts countryside at midnight, shouting, "The British are coming!" alerting the sleeping patriots of Lexington and Concord just in time to spark the American Revolution. Hero, icon, founding father on horseback. Also, not exactly how it happened. The Paul Revere you know was mostly created by a man named Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, a poet who, in 1861, sat down during the lead-up to the Civil War and thought, you know what this country needs? A revolutionary superhero, with a horse and rhyming couplets. Thus was born Paul Revere's Ride, a deeply rousing, wildly inaccurate retelling of events that took place more than 80 years earlier. To be clear, Longfellow wasn't even trying to be historically accurate. He wanted to inspire Northern unity against slavery and looming secession. So he cherry-picked his facts, cranked up the drama, and left out literally everyone else involved. And in doing so, he immortalized Revere as the lone messenger who saved America by riding dramatically into the darkness while yelling stuff. Spoiler, he did none of that. Let's check off what the poem claims. Solo midnight ride? Nope. He had company, and we'll get to them. Cried the British are coming. Also, nope. That would have been very confusing, since most colonists still considered themselves British. Warned the countryside and completed the ride? Negative. He was actually stopped by British patrols before reaching Concord. Spoiler again, another guy actually made it all the way. So what we've got here is a classic case of historical Mad Libs. Take a bunch of complex facts, remove everyone but one guy, and crank that hero meter until school children are reciting it 150 years later. But what really happened that night? Who else rode? Who got caught? And why did one of them have to finish the ride on foot? Next, we meet the real Paul Revere, the plan behind the Midnight Warning, and the network of riders, lanterns, and backup horses that history forgot to mention. Also, yes, we'll explain the lantern thing. Because another spoiler, it had nothing to do with Revere seeing it. It's the night of April 18th, 1775. The vibes? Tense, colonial, a little damp. Boston is crawling with British soldiers, or regulars as they were called then, getting ready to march out towards Lexington and Concord, where colonial leaders Samuel Adams and John Hancock are hiding out, and where a bunch of rebel militias have been stashing gunpowder like it's a revolutionary Costco. The colonial resistance knows something's about to go down. They just don't know exactly when. Enter Paul Revere, silversmith, engraver, and part-time courier for the Sons of Liberty. That night, Dr. Joseph Warren, a revolutionary leader in Boston, sends word to Revere. It's happening. The British are moving tonight. The mission? Ride to Lexington, warn Adams and Hancock to pack their powdered wigs and run, then head to Concord to alert the militias. So Revere springs into action. But instead of jumping on a horse and yelling into the night like some colonial cowboy, he gets in a rowboat. Yes, step one of the famous midnight ride was a quiet canoe trip across the Charles River. Revere and two Confederates row past a British warship, muffling their oars with cloth to avoid being noticed. It's like Mission Impossible scene, but everyone's wearing wool and carrying secret lantern messages instead of lasers and Tom Cruise running stiffly. Before setting out, Revere had arranged a pre-ride signal to be displayed in the steeple of Boston's Old North Church. One lantern if British were coming by land, two lanterns if they crossed the Charles River by boat. That way, if Revere couldn't make it, someone else might still get the message out. Two lanterns were hung, because the British were taking the water route. But contrary to popular belief, Revere didn't see the lanterns himself. He was already on the water when they were lit. So, yes, one if by land, two if by sea was a thing. No, it wasn't a secret message to Revere. And no, it wasn't meant to be a tattoo on your cousin's ribcage. Once in Charlestown, Revere borrows a horse, a fast mare named Brown Beauty, generously and probably reluctantly provided by a man named John Larkin. Fun fact, this would be the most historically famous moment of Larkin's entire life. Guy who lent Revere a horse he never got back. Imagine someone borrows your car to warn the founding fathers, then never returns it. No statue, no shout out, no thank you for your horse, just erased. So Revere takes off, galloping through the countryside, stopping at every house and hamlet to warn the locals that British troops were on the move. But here's where the solo legend starts to fall apart. Because another rider, William Dawes, had already left a half an hour earlier from Boston on a completely different route. Dawes took the longer land path through the Boston Neck and Roxbury, while Revere took the river and horse shortcut. Both were heading to the same place, Lexington. Because this wasn't just Paul Revere doing heroic cosplay on horseback. This was a coordinated effort, a network of riders ready to spring into action like the world's most patriotic Uber drivers. Revere reaches Lexington around midnight. Dawes arrives soon after. They deliver the message to Hancock and Adams, who immediately start packing their stuff and arguing about whether they should stay and fight or leave quietly with dignity. Hancock did not want to leave quietly. That man had flair. But the ride isn't over yet. Revere and Dawes decide to keep going towards Concord. And along the way, they pick up one more rider, a young doctor named Samuel Prescott, who just so happens to be in the right place at the right time. Next, we'll meet Prescott, the unsung hero who actually finishes the ride, and see how Revere's midnight dash comes to an abrupt, awkward stop involving British soldiers, missing horses, and some very confused redcoats. When last we left our trio of late-night alarm clocks, Paul Revere had joined forces with William Dawes and Dr. Samuel Prescott, forming what we can only describe as the first revolutionary group text on horseback. Their mission? Continue on to Concord, where colonial weapons were stored and British troops were unknowingly about to walk into the angry, well-armed version of a neighborhood watch. They spread out, galloping from town to town, warning sleeping militia leaders and random farmers to grab their muskets and tell their friends. But just as the plan is working, they hit a snag. Actually, several snags wearing redcoats. Because around 1:30 a.m., the three riders are stopped near Lincoln, Massachusetts by a British patrol. This wasn't a random encounter. The British knew colonial messengers would be trying to get ahead of them, and they had men stationed along key roads to intercept them. And just like that, the midnight ride turned into a traffic stop with bayonets. Imagine it. You're racing through the dark, delivering messages to save the colonies, and boom, you're surrounded by redcoats asking questions like it's a revolutionary TSA. So what happens? Dawes gets away but falls off his horse almost immediately and limps off into the night. Not ideal. Revere is detained, questioned at gunpoint, and has his horse confiscated. He's forced to walk back to Lexington. He'll later refer to this as being stopped and detained, which is the colonial equivalent of soft arrested. But Samuel Prescott? Oh, Prescott's built different. He yells something like, "I'm just a doctor heading home." Then he spurs his horse into the woods, leaps a stone wall in the dark, and disappears into the trees. And unlike the other two, he escapes. Let's take a moment to appreciate this. Samuel Prescott, a literal country doctor who happened to be riding home from his girlfriend's house, became the only one of the three to actually complete the ride and warn Concord. No poem, no monument, no motivational t-shirt. Just a guy with a horse, a message, and a surprisingly good vertical. Meanwhile, Paul Revere, hero of our myth, has been let go by the British after some stern questioning and a solid shake of the fist. But without a horse, he does what any grounded revolutionary would do. He walks. He eventually makes it to the house where John Hancock left a valuable trunk full of revolutionary documents and helps get it to safety. So yes, Revere did contribute, but the famous ride? It ended for him in the middle. So let's recap. Dawes made the first leg, fell off a horse. Revere got stopped, lost his ride. Prescott cleared the roadblock with a stealth move Jason Bourne would admire and finished the mission. If this were a Marvel movie, Prescott would be the guy who shows up in the third act, saves everyone, and then disappears before the credits, only to be forgotten entirely when the sequel rolls around. Thanks to this messy, chaotic relay ride, backed by dozens of lesser-known riders in surrounding towns, the militia was ready. By the time the British troops arrived in Lexington and Concord, they were met by armed and angry colonists, not sleepy farmers with pitchforks. The result? The first real military confrontation of the American Revolution. And it all started with a borrowed horse, a rowboat, a network of midnight messengers, and a doctor who did parkour before it was cool. But if Paul Revere didn't finish the ride, how did he become the face of it? Next, we look at the posthumous PR campaign that turned a real guy into a one-man legend, and how everyone else basically got Thanos snapped out of history by a 19th century poet. So here we are. The ride is over. The warnings were delivered, mostly. The militia mobilized. And the opening shots of the American Revolution have been fired. Paul Revere goes back to silversmithing and not having a horse. William Dawes fades into obscurity like a side character in a miniseries nobody finished. And Samuel Prescott jumps a stone wall, saves the day, and is never heard from again. Literally. The historical record kind of loses track of him. And then, 80 years later, in 1861, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow sits down at his writing desk, dips his pen into some vintage American nationalism, and drops, "Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere." Boom! Legend locked. Let's be honest, Longfellow wasn't trying to be a historian, he was trying to be a motivational speaker in verse. The Civil War was brewing, the Union was shaky, he wanted to inspire Northerners with a story of bravery and patriotism. So he picked Paul Revere. Not because Revere did the most, but because 1, Revere was already vaguely famous. 2, his name had good rhythm. 3, Prescott doesn't rhyme with anything except desk rot, and that's just tragic. And William Dawes? He got cut like the least funny sketch in a Saturday Night Live table read. Longfellow's poem gave us the version of history we all remember. Solo rider? False. Shouted the British are coming? Nope. Made it to Concord? Not even close. Carried the nation on his back like a founding father Uber driver? Only in verse. But the damage, or the legend, was done. Textbooks picked it up. Teachers taught it. Statues went up. Reenactments were staged. And before you could say historical nuance, Paul Revere was the undisputed king of the Midnight Ride. Meanwhile, Samuel Prescott, the guy who actually finished the mission, got no statues, no poems, no postage stamps. just a vague historical footnote and, we assume, a very smug horse. Here's the thing. Revere's ride did matter. He was brave, he was committed, he risked his life for the cause. But the real strength of that night came from the network. Dozens of riders, coordinators, and locals who spread the alarm across the countryside. It was the group text of rebellion, and without it, Lexington and Concord might have gone very differently. So yes, Paul Revere was part of history, but he wasn't the whole ride. He was the guy with the head start and the bad luck. The guy who got caught and still made the history books. Basically, the original main character of the American Revolution. The next time you hear someone quote Longfellow's poem or bring up Paul Revere like he saved the colonies with one epic sprint, go ahead and nod, then tell them about William Dawes and Dr. Samuel Prescott and the wall jump and the horse that wasn't even his. Because history, it rides on more than one saddle. Thanks for listening to History on the Margins. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a review, share it with your history-loving friend, and remember, when the revolution starts, don't be the guy who doesn't return the horse. Next time, we cover an all-new odd moment in history. Until then, remember, history is weird. Let's keep it that way.